Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we're Masechtas Yevamot daf Nun Ches. We are going to begin on the bottom of Nun Zayin Mabez, the second line from the bottom. We were learning a machlokas when it comes to whether we hold yesh chuppah l'psulos. Namely, if let's say you have a Kohen Gadol who's not allowed to marry an almana, a widow, but let's say he doesn't do kedushin, because if he would do kedushin to a Bas Yisrael who is an almana, then we fall into this dispute in our Mishnah whether or not at that moment already she cannot eat truma. Certainly at the time of Bia, she's not allowed to eat truma. But what if he only did chuppah? So in this we had a machlokas. So now the Gemara continues. Amar Rami Barchama yesh chuppah l'psulos banu machlokas Rameir v'Reb Elazar Rav Shimon. So this machlokas is similar to our machlokas, which is in our Mishnah. As we said, whether or not an almana to a Kohen Gadol, as long as, let's say, he did its min ha'erison, lo yochel b'truma. As soon as kedushin is done, from the moment he did kedushin, because they're in the process of eventually getting married, which is an avera, so therefore the question is that enough already to passel this Bas Kohen that she can no longer eat truma? So just like over there, we say it's a machlokas, maybe it's also the same, similar machlokas when it comes to this Kohen Gadol that only does chuppah before kedushin. So we're saying maybe it's the same machlokas. So as we continue to Nun Chesed Aleph, Rameir de Omer kedushin pasli chuppah nami pasla. Maybe he holds that just like when the Kohen Gadol does kedushin to the almana, that will automatically passel her from eating truma, even though she was a bas kohen, she was eating, she can no longer do so. However, and therefore it's the same thing when it comes to chuppah. So maybe we'll say that they're the same. Gemara says not necessarily. It's not necessarily that they hold the same thing. Maybe the only time Rameir says in our Mishnah is El B'Kedushin, is where the Kohen Gadol actually did an act of kedushin, the kanila, that he actually did a kinyan, because she now is drawn to him through kedushin. However, when it comes to chuppah, the Gemara in kedushin discusses whether chuppah is kaina mekav chaymer. It's a whole discussion over there. So l'chayr it's not. Chuppah is not one of the gimel devarim. So therefore, it's not a kinyan, and therefore maybe she could still eat truma. Inami ad kol kamer Rabbi Elazar Rav Shimon hasam el b'kedushin d'loy kriv l'bia. Maybe they're only lenient when it comes to kedushin because you're still far away from the act of having relations. Avol chuppah the kriv l'bia hachanami de pasla. When you bring her under the chuppah, that already is closer to the moment of bia. So therefore, maybe in that situation she will be pasal. If you want to say that this argument about yesh chuppah l'psulos, perhaps it's based on a different machlok. It's not the one in our Mishnah that we just said. It's based on the following, the sanya. Nisui zu v'zu. Let's say he married this one and this one. Says Rashi, l'koyin zu v'zu. So my zuvazu, so the Gemara says, ksheres upsulos. So he married a woman who's a kasher and one who's a apostle. Oh, shenichtasul chuppah, or it says here, this is what we're focusing on, that he brought them into chuppah. V'lo nivalu, but he didn't have tashmish. Ochelas mishloi v'ochelas b'truma. She's allowed to eat from him, and she eats truma. So nichnasu, when it says nichnasu chuppah, machlal denisu. Nisu mamish. Our first case is talking about where he actually did nisu. He actually married her. So the question is, how's that shaykh? Because at that moment, if she was nisu, then she's a chalala, and therefore you would say that certainly she should not be able to eat. Elalav, this has to be the case. It's just talking about pashut. That's all she did. Not that kedushin was done before or anything, but all was done. There was no nisuin, but rather all he did was chuppah without bia. So we see there's actually opinion that says you can eat, she continue to eat truma in that case. So we see, according to this opinion, yesh chapel psulos. Rabbi Shmuel ben Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka Imer kol shebiyasa machilasa chupasa machilasa. So anytime that the bia allows her to continue to eat, so the chuppah also. B'chol she'en biyasa machilasa ein chupasa machilasa. So according to this is holding yesh chapel psulos, because once you have bia with a person who is apostle, that certainly, well, she can't eat truma. So too when it comes to chuppah. So we see, according to this opinion, yesh chuppah psulos. Really, he holds like Reb Meir in of our Mishnah, that not just by chuppah, it's actually before that, by kedushin. Even by kedushin, she can't eat truma, this bas kohen. Once the kohen gadol takes the salmana and does kedushin, that's it, which means the chuppah later on really means nothing. Hai kol she'in biyasa machilasa, ein chupasa machilasa, kol she'in biyasa machilasa, ein kaspa machilasa meboile. The question is, why does it say ein chupasa? If you want to tell me that we're talking about there was a case of kedushin before, then it sounds like he says beferish, it's the chuppah that's the disqualifier, but it should say in kaspa, the kedusha kesef. It's the kedushin. If we're actually saying like that. So again, it's not necessarily a raya that they hold yesh chuppah l'psulos. Yesh chuppah l'psulos. Maybe not. Maybe we don't say such a thing. Maybe it's only like Rameir at the time of Kedushin, because it was a Kinyan, but not necessarily the case where only chuppah was done. Amr of Amram, Hamilsa Amrul and Rav Sheshes. There was a matter that was said by Rav Sheshes. Ve'an harinhu ein l'oyin. And he caused her eyes to be lit up in Masnisan. Yesh chuppah l'psulos. That in fact there is an opinion that yesh chuppah, that the kohen gadol who just does chuppah, there's a din of psulos, that at that moment, that's it. She is puzzled to eat truma. But tanatuna. And we have this support. When it comes to a sota, so she makes a declaration, there's a declaration said, and then amen is recited. So amen shulsatisi arusa. So she was not secluded with this man when she was engaged. Unasur married. Shemeres yavam, when she was a shemeres yavam, namely that her husband died and she was childless, she was zokuk to the yavam. Uknusa, or married to him. So a hayarusa hechidami. What exactly is the statement? That I didn't seclude myself with this man when I was engaged at the time of Kedushin. Elim the kanila kashin arusa, that he was kinda her as an arusa, and there's the kanila because she arusa means that she secluded herself at that time. So become mashkila kashi arusa, and now Nisun was never done. Only Erison was done, only Kedushin, and she's gonna now drink the Mesota at this status of being an arusa. It's not true. An arusa bas mishtahi. Does she actually drink? Vatanan arusa shmeres yabam ein lo shosos lo notos ksuba. She doesn't drink. So it's hard to the push-up shot of her saying shlosatisi arusa can't literally mean that she secluded herself as an arusa and she's still an arusa, because then she wouldn't be drinking mesota. The din is you don't drink mesota at that time. El de kanali kashi arusa. Rather, you're right. She secluded herself as an arusa, and then the istatra of the mashgila kashi nesua, and she ended up then being with her husband afterwards, and they ended up getting married afterwards. So mi badkila Maya, once the husband takes her back, even though she was secluded beforehand, is she actually going to again be baited by the Maya? V'nika ha'ish me'avoin. It has to be that the man is also the husband is clean. Bizman she'ish menuka mi'avoin hamayin baikin as ishto. Ein ha'ish menuka mi'avoin ein hamayin baikin as ishto. So if he's clean from sin, says Rashi, Shlo Boel Acher Shinistra, that he never had relations with this woman until after the seclusion, so he's clean, because he was really not allowed to have taken her at that moment, once there's this suspicion of her being with this man. So therefore, it can't be that case either. It can't be that she was suspected as an arusa and now she's in a sua. It can't be she was suspected as an arusa and she is still an arusa. The question is, how do we understand that she's making this declaration, Shlosatisi arusa? What do you mean? Mamanashach. If she's still an arusa, she doesn't drink mesota. If she's now in a sua, okay, a woman who's had Nisuin does drink Mesota, but how did she get from the status of an Arusa to Nisuin? Must be her husband was boil. So if he had Tashmish, well, Chayra, that would, we know, again, that disqualifies her. El Dekaniwa Kashi Arusa, again, she secluded herself during Erison, and here's the catch. Vistarta v'nichnasal chuppah v'nivola, shmamina yesh chuppah psulois. The only other possibility is the husband never had bia, so what is this next step? He did chuppah. So we see that she's able to drink mesota by her having done the chuppah. So we see that, as Rashi says, midamashkila, the fact that she can drink, she's after having gone to the chuppah, it's not the same thing as only kedushin. Yesh chuppah l'psulois v'krinin beitachas isheich. It's like she's married to this man, the kanoi chuppah. The afagav doli chaz labia the hasurloi mishinistera. Again, she's usher to be with him, but it's okay. It's the same case we're saying of the Kohen Gadol Almana, that he did chuppah, but there was no bia. So we see that's a raya of yesh chuppah l'psulois. Where it says no. Or Rabbi v'tizbra daha misratzta. He thinks it's good. He also Rabbi Acha Bar Chanina Medoraimo also v'Aisim Asnisim B'Yadei. The pasuk says Mibaldi Ishech. So what do we darshan from here? Mi shekad mashchivas baal l'boil, v'lo shekad mashchivas boil l'baal. The only time there's another requirement. The only time the waters can check her is if the husband first had bia, then the boil, this suspected man, had tashmish with her. However, if this case where they never had bia, all they did was chuppah, and then the boil was before the baal, because the baal never even had tashmish, then that also wouldn't work. That's also a disqualification. So it can't be that that's the case either. So Rabbi Barchama, Mishkach Kain Shibole Arusa Bebeis Aviha. We're talking about a case where really the husband did have tashmish with her, but it was Shalol L'Shem Ishus. So therefore, the Baal came before the boil, but they were not really considered to be married. The Kavasi Gabi Shemer Shavam. So therefore, we can then compare it to the case of a Shemer Shavam, Shabol Leha Yavam Bebeis Chamia, that he had tashmish with her Bebeis Chamia. Says Rashi L'Shem Znus. Now, he didn't have L'Shem her becoming his Yavam, but it was just L'Shem Znus. Says Rashi Bebeis Chamia. Be'armanusa, v'hader kiniwa v'istera dechnisel chuppah. Then he brought her to chuppah v'lo nivola, and that, but he didn't have bia with her afterwards, because it can't be, because once she's suspected of being with this man, if he had bia, then he's no longer v'nika. He's no longer the category of v'nika ha'ish mi'avoin. Saying that I was not, my original stira, I was not actually with this man. I did not actually have relations with this man. So we're establishing it like this. So again, because that's also in the category Shaboleha Yavam Beis Chamia, as we continue the Chesam and Beis, Shemeresh Yavam Kares Law. Will she be called a Shemeresh Yavam? Ish Malyahi, Da Omer Rav Kanal Koil. We said in the beginning of this parak that, as Rashi says, be shaygin gumezid. Even if it was l'shem's nus, it doesn't matter when it comes to a shemer shavam. That bia is a bia, and therefore she's your wife. So if we're going to actually connect it to the case, because we're saying arusa and then shemer shavam, those are the statements of Amen. So it's not true, because when it comes to a yavam or shemer shavam, it's a kinyan, even if it was l'shem's nus. Says Kishmul, the Amr lo kana. He actually says it's not kana. El davarm hamurim b'parsha only the things that are found in the Parsha, but nothing else. Because it was like an inferior bia, as we said, so only he's now yarish his brother's things, and it'll maybe free up the co-wives, but nothing else. Midi hu taima el Rav, but this is not according to the Shita Shul. This is like Rav. Ha'imar Rav kanul koil. So hakmai skina. So what are we going to do? Going to Ovid b'maimer. We're talking about a situation where he did maimer. Says Rashi. When we talk about the case of the Shemer Yavam, it's not talking about a case of Bia. Because if it's a case of Bia, then he's married to her. He only did Maimer. However, it's like Beis Shammai, the Amri Maimer Kaina Kinyan Gomer. It's an actual complete Kinyan. 1 second. So if it's like him, Si Hachi, so Hainu Arusa. So that's really the same thing as an Arusa. As Rashi says, Arusa Gemura, Arusa Hatanila. So it's really the same thing. Whereas this El Taimech Nesua Kanusa Lav Chada Milsehi, that's also the same thing. El Nesua Didei Ukanusa Dechavre. Hachanami Arusa Didei Vashemer Shelvim Dechavre. One's talking about your wife, and then through the kinyan of your brother's wife. Rapapa Oimer Hai Tanahu, it's based on the following Tanya. So we didn't really prove that the case of Yesh Chupal Psulos, because this can't be the case of a Sota. Because if it's the case, as we said, of a Sota, where there's only chuppah and there's no bia, there's the chisaron of having the baal has to be before the boil. So we said, no, and maybe that's not the case. We said possibly he did have a bia, but it was a bia shalo, a bia l'shem znos. It was not l'shem ishus. And therefore, so he did have bia with her. But he didn't have bia with her after she was suspect. Again, when it comes to Shemer Shavam, we say no, the case of Shemer Shavam is that he did Maimer. So it's not exactly the same situation. Okay, the Sanya. Ein Mekanin la Arusa, we do not, again, say that she's considered to be kinoi when it comes to only being an Arusa, la Shkaisa Kashi Arusa. As we said, when she's an Arusa, and she secluded herself on Arusa, no, it has to be like Tachasi Sheikh. However, we do allow her to drink when she is an Nesua. And this is how we can perhaps understand this when it says, this is question 3, Gilgal Shavua. So really, maybe you're only questioning her on now when she had Nesuin, she's your wife. However, you could also, once you're already making a Shvuah, we allow you to roll other Shvuahs in. We say, well, once you're already mentioning this, you need to swear about everything else. Let's say a person does Maimer to his Yevama, as we've been discussing. And it turns out that if this man, in addition to Reuven, Shimon, Levi died, so Reuven does Maimer to the woman, and there's also Shimon. Now, who Kohen, even if he's a Kohen, he Kohenes, Pasla Min HaTruma. So we say that she could be puzzled from Truma. Okay, let's see if there's a Rashi here. Shemer's, okay. Well, man, what is this referring to? Who is this like? Elema, Rameir again, who said that Kedushin is enough to apostle. So, Amdim Rameir, Mishtameres Labia Pesula, Lo Achla Midaraisa. He only said this din. Okay, let's look in Rashi over here. Mishtameres Labia Pesula, that if a person is a Mishtameres for a bia psula, says Rashi, sheish biyad achiv, it's in the hands of the other brother, lavo leha, to have tashmish with her, ubiyasu bia, and it would still be a bia. V'chi heichi dihi mishtameres lebiyasai, kachi mishtameres lebiyas achiv. So she's waiting for bia, but it could be Reuven or Shimon. Shehi pas psul midrabanan. Yesh bia acher maimer. There is a concept of bia after maimer, as we discussed. So even though Reuven did Maimer, the Shimon who did Bia, that would actually have some validity, as we saw before in Daf Nun, Maimer Lazu, Boil Lazu. So in this case, If you have a mishmeres labia psula lo achla midaraisa. So because it's shaykh that the other brother could do bia with her, so that mimer alone will passel. It says deraisa. Bia, she passel deraisa. If let's say Shimon would have bia with her, it's a psul deraisa. Could go in a manal kain gadol. The Rabbanan mi amar. Does he say this midrabanan? The Elu Rebbe Lezer Rabbi Shimon hash mishmeres will be a psul deraisa achla. The Rabbanan miboy. El kiyas Rabban Oimer asaba mimer biavimto dibra hakol achla. In the event that a person did mimer to his Yevamot, so everyone holds, as Rashi says, Bein Rav Yochanan, Bein Reish Lakish, Achel Betruma, Debei Nasa. She can continue to eat if she's a bas kohen from her father's house. Says Rashi, Do Hafil Rav Meir will puzzle El Mishmeres will be a psula diraisa. It's only when a situation where it was mimer, there's another brother that could have be with her. So that's when there's an issue. But just stam mimer, she can continue to eat. Yeshlo ach chol divrei hakol. If let's say one of the brothers is a chol, then divrei hakol she will not be able to eat. Says Rashi, I feel he bas kohen. Even though she's a bas kohen, she could no longer eat. Says Rashi, the ovid ba mimer kohen kosher. Even though Reuven was the one who's a kohen kosher, he did mimer a kanti mishtameres will be a psula. It's possible that Shimon, because there's bia after mimer, can end up having bia with her, which would be a psula. He would be a chol, because he's a chol. That would be psula deraisa. So because of that, v'lo achla, we're not going to allow her to eat in the event, again, that there's this brother who's a chol. V'lo nechel elo shenasan lo get. The whole machlokus is davka in a situation where he gave a get. Says Rashi, a Kohen gave to his Yevamot Liavimto Kohenes a get. V'kati lebiyasai himishtameres ubiyasa psul midrabanan. Once a get is given, so we say that the bia is a psul midrabanan, because in that situation, once there was already a get given, it's not shaykh to do yibum anymore. So that bia is really a din derabanan only. So lo nechlo elo shenasnal get. Rabbi Yochanan omer ocheles, she can still eat. Reish Lakish omer eno ocheles. Rabbi Yochanan omer ocheles, I feel Rav Meir. Yerme eno ocheles hani mili mishtameres lo bia psula deraisa. Only time when again where the other brother is a chol, so and he could possibly have bia with her after the mimer. Avol the rabbanan achla. However, if it's since he gave a get, so therefore the bia is not going to passel her, because that's not connecting in a way of to yibum. Reish Lakish emer eno ocheles. Afir belaz Rabbi Shimon emer ocheles. Hanimil diyesh lo lahachel b'makam acher. That's only because literally she could be eating in another place. By the get, kivan de eno lahachel b'makam acher. There's no way you'd be able to truma in that situation well. Well, what happens if she's choseres? In other words, that she can go back to her original situation. Choseres paskamine ukroivula be nasa avalha agida be. So again, this is the explanation of this potential machlokus. So let's look at question 4. I'm going to stop here. Kohen she'asa mimer biavimto. So if you had a kohen that did mimer to a Yevamot who's a kohenes, o nasan laget v'lo ach kosher, and there's a brother who's a kosher. Ha'im pasla min truma. Question is, this woman by mimer, is she going to be puzzle? So if he did also mimer, will pasla. Mimer is not going to passel, because again we're talking about there's a kush. The only other brother is kosher, so he's not going to cause her any problems. But nasan get, if let's say he gave a get in that situation, it's a machlokas between Rav Yochanan and Reish Lakish. Let's look at TA 11. Amen shalasiti arusa. Etc. Samahu ha'hechrach shel hagemara b'havamina. The Irish shekaidim hashka nichnas l'chapa. Maya hechrach do konsul b'bia. Ma muchoch l'fi zeh b'hach mastisen. That's a hard question. So he says like this: De'im ha'isa rusa harin mashkinai. So it can't be that she's drinking now, because then during the time of Erison she doesn't drink. V'im konsababia hari enu menukim avoin. If let's say he already had bia with her afterwards, so she's not menukim. He's not menukim avoin. Shemamina yesh chupul psulois. So we tried to derive from that this whole concept of yesh chuppah l'psulois. That's what we tried to deduce from it, but we ended up saying that can't possibly be, because again, that means he never had tashmish. At that stage, if he never had tashmish, then it has to be that the baal must come before the boil. But since the baal never had tashmish, then you wouldn't be able to say this. That's TA 11. So we end up saying it must be a case that he was had bia with her shlul shem ishus. TB 13. Menolan de'in adkan.